Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, we hear about Pierre's improbable story. From growing up with almost nothing to being a first-generation high school and college graduate and earning $30,000 in his first job out of school, to pursuing a master's in organizational psychology and eventually landing at UVA for his MBA at Darden. We learn how he managed to secure at Goldman during the great financial crisis in the private wealth management division, how he navigated feeling like an outsider, and why he eventually moved back out west after over a decade. All right, Pierre, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Sure, man. Well, glad to be here. I know it's a little bit longer, a little bit overdue, but definitely let's make the most of our time today. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. So real quick, if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I am calling you now from Los Angeles, which is where I'm from. So specifically the Long Beach area, Long Beach, California. I went to undergrad at Long Beach State, was a psychology, anthropology major there. Graduated many moons ago in 2002.
We're the same year.
Yeah. From there, I ended up working in my first job out. I worked at a drug rehab facility doing statistics, so outcomes research. I've always had a very strong stats orientation. Mm-hmm. Even my undergrad programs were like leaning stats. Then from there, I got a master's in this field called industrial organizational psychology. So we're a little bit aged, you and I. So like for the older listeners, there's a movie called Office Space. Many people may know about it, but like there's Bob and Bob effectiveness consultants. I was a Bob. So like we would come in and show organizations how to be more efficient from a management perspective. So I did that for a couple of years. And then went to the University of Virginia, the Darden School of Business, to get an MBA. Graduated from Darden in 2009. In between there, I was a summer associate at Goldman Sachs in their investment management division. With intentions of being in their Mid-Atlantic office, which is Philly/DC. Had a great summer there. Was offered to come back. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then ended up coming back to Goldman in their New York office. So I was a 10-year banker at Goldman in New York City, although I'd never lived in New York, no connectivity to it. We'll talk about that. Did that for a while, had a great experience there, tons of relationships, and came out back to the West Coast and then worked for a small regional bank called the Bank of California, covering real estate developers, venture capital, and private equity investors, doing capital call facilities, just effectively extending balance sheet. And now I'm at a full service digital marketing agency called Power Digital Marketing, where I run venture capital and private equity for them. And what that means is that we have this proprietary tech, this diligence tech that's been around for 7 years, is machine AI. And what it does is allows us to quantify the score of a portfolio company, the digital marketing score. But more importantly, it allows us to forecast revenue growth. So if the PE and VC investors, they come to us, they incorporate us as a part of their diligence process, and we're helping them make better investment decisions. So happy to be here. Happy to kind of dig a little bit deeper on any aspect or pivot in my life, and
we'll go from there. Let's go way back all the way to undergrad, because I want to know. Did you a little bit more like the quant stats background? You did. It looks like you graduated in 3 years. Is that accurate?
Yeah, man. So
why
we're
3
talking
years?
about birthdays of our little ones. Yeah. So my birthday is May 9th. So even when I graduated high school in 99, but I was supposed to be the class of 2000. My many more moons ago, when I was a little one, my mom was like, you know what? I'm not going to pay for childcare anymore. We're just going to go ahead and put you into school early. So I started school a year earlier. I had a decent time in high school. It was hard because I'm a big guy, and you can't see through the screen. I'm 6'4", 240, right? But when I was in high school, since I was younger, I was smaller, right? And I played sports, and it really didn't work out well being a year ahead. Like you typically want to delay a year, right? So, and I went to the high school I went to was Long Beach Poly High School. Very well-known sports program, like Deshaun Jackson, Mercedes Lewis, like one of the top premier programs, like NFL and NBA athletes. Like, long story short, like I knew that I wasn't going to college for ball because I wasn't getting a lot of burn. I wasn't getting burned in high school. I wasn't getting any playing time in high school. So when I got to college, everything was about moving quickly and trying to find a way to get a job to contribute to the household. And I was sort of, to take a step back, I was first generation everything, first generation high school, college, everything, right?
Yeah.
So I went to Herbie graduate in psychologist initially because I wanted to help people. like in terms of like helping my community. I had some, some challenges as a kid in terms of my household structure and whatnot. I went like, that's really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I randomly came across anthropology, and I was like, well, this is pretty cool too. Like, I love culture, I love people. It's like understanding and that was the best way for me to travel, is to come and like learn about other cultures, right? I wasn't traveling physically, but like you can just learn about other aspects of the world just by reading and whatnot. So,
so finance or anything around that was not even on the radar at that point.
No, not at all, dude. I'm like a LA Long Beach kid. Like, nobody was a banker in my house, so like nobody, like nothing, like none. Like, I didn't know about Wall Street. I didn't know about any of that stuff. It'll make sense too when we talk about like going to business school. But yeah, my program was like very like stats oriented, like research oriented. We used to use this software called SPSS, statistical packages for the social sciences. So like I came with the SPSS background, like not knowing how to use Excel. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, the people nowadays, like, you don't touch your mouse. Like, I'm literally like hugging my mouse. I'm like touching the keyboards, like, with one or two fingers. It was just crazy, right? When I started like working in finance. But nonetheless, so when my first job out was literally looking at the success rates of people that have gone through like drug treatment facilities, and it was like mandated by the state. So I'm still doing well. Like, I'm doing, it's like for a good cause, where like I'm getting foundation funding by showing the research results, and I'm doing like all these multiple regressions, like this high-end statistical analysis. And, from that point, I was like, well, psychology is great, but like I got to find a way to kind of get paid more. So like industrial organizational psychology, like that.
What were you getting paid right out of school for that type of
dude, you got to adjust for like
40K
inflation, right?
or something like that?
Not even that, bro. Like, not even that. Like, it was like 32,000, right? Like, literally. Yeah. But it was a cool gig.
It's a job. It's a job, and you're doing
But what's cool though was like I was able to work remotely from home, and like it was like I ran the group. Like, I didn't report to anybody. Like, I just reported to the founder of the foundation, and like I'm just doing research, like at the house, kind of like working through numbers. And it was like I didn't have to be in a student or do anything like that. So, anyways, I ended up concurrently going to graduate school in San Bernardino, which is like 2 hours away from Long Beach, and got this master's in IO psychology. The firm that I work for in terms of consulting is called PDI, Personnel Decisions International. They were acquired by a couple of the firms by now, but like 90% of the consultants there had PhDs in psychology, right? So if you think about, for those in the audience that have gone to like that are business majors as undergrads, it'd be like your organizational behavior professor or like your leadership development professor, right?
Right.
So like, so for me, so I came in with the master's, and what I was doing was effectively assessing managers on like their cognitive ability, their personality tests, like some role plays, and like digest all that data.
You were coming in and trying to figure out who should be cut, who should be kept, kind of thing.
Literally, yeah. Like who's a high
office space.
Who's a high potential performer and so forth, right? It's like there was a lot of like executive one-on-one coaching that took place. And once we identified the holes in terms of your development areas,
did you feel like there's enough there? Because I looked into a little bit of that in terms of like mapping the scores of like your best performers, like the personalities within an organization, and then trying to map it to the new hires, try to hire people.
So that's what I did. So it's like there's this concept like competency modeling, right? It's like, so how do you define, like you'll take your high performance within your organization, and you'll map their personality, you'll map their approach to the job, and you'll say, okay, these are the things that we actually want to hire for, right? And so like, and then you do that, and then I would create the interview questions based on it. I would create the scoring sheets, and then there's definitely science behind it. They're 110%. There's science behind it. So like all we were doing was like thinking through the numbers, and like basically applying psychology to the workplace.
But like, sorry to interrupt, but why were you? What even pushed you to even know to go to industrial organizational psychology? Like, was there somebody who was like, "Hey, you should go"?
I took a class, man. It was IO Psych. It was like an upper 300 or upper 400 level class, and it was like that was the highest paying field of psychology. I literally thought I wanted to be a clinical psychologist at that point, right? Like I wanted to help the community, and it was the highest paying field of psych, and like they weren't. That field of psych is not hiring undergrads directly, right? So like, so doing the research, and within IO Psych, there's a math component that's implied. So that's why I kind of went the other route. But yeah, I took a class. I was taking all these psych courses. I'm like, I got to find a way to get paid. It's great to be community focused, but it would be nice to kind of think about it. It allowed me. I thought I was a business guy as a young kid, right? Like everybody thinks they're kind of an entrepreneur, rightfully so, and they should be. And it's like, this is the closest that you can get within the lens of psychology to business. So my clients back then were like, it was great. It was great, man. It was like Sony Electronics in San Diego, Nestle Purina in St. Louis, New Century Financial, Countrywide Financial. And this is like back in, if you think about it, this is like back in 07, like 06. Yeah. So I've seen it all. Right. And so like I'm hiring for the sales reps that are like slinging mortgages like crazy. And like, I get to see their personality types and get to see their cognitive ability scores. And like, and training them up, right, and outlining a plan. So it was a great experience. And what I realized is that I was a consultant and I knew about like effective management and leadership, but I didn't know how to read a balance sheet, right? So like in terms of like competency models, like strategic thinking, being collaborative, like inspiring others, like these are these big kind of like buckets in terms of like, being an effective business person.
Yeah.
And like another one is like financial acumen. Like I was short personally on financial acumen. So how can I coach somebody else on financial acumen? I was surrounded by great resources, but like I didn't know it myself, right? And I was a younger guy, and I didn't really have experience. Like I was coaching literally people that were 10 or 15 years older than me. It sounds crazy,
You were
but
like,
legitimately.
yeah, but you were like 25 at this point, or 26.
Yeah,
So
barely. And it's like, but I was well versed in the research. We had our own proprietary insights, right? And like I knew it. I knew how to do I knew what leadership looked like. I knew the formulas, but I was like, I didn't have the experiential context. I wasn't a business unit leader. I haven't ran a business before that, right? And not even really after that as well.
So just coming out of that master's, what did you land? Did you get that big raise from the 30,000? Did you get something more kind of closer to six figures, or
So the firm that I worked for, so towards my tail end, it was a 2-year program. So like the last semester, I ended up working at that firm, PDI Personnel. That's the firm where they had 90% PhDs. Yeah. And the bump then was probably like, I went from like 30 to like 48, maybe I just touched 50.
Yeah.
And I wasn't completely done with my program yet. So like they gave me a little bit of love and allowed me to start before that. But, and that was back in, it had to be, I started business school 07. So it had to be like, it had to be like 04. It had to be 04 because I did a year teaching math at a local high school as well.
Yeah.
At Dominguez High School in Compton, California, which is like one of the best jobs I ever had actually in life.
That's cool.
I think the firm I'm at now is literally the best job I had. Like before I came to Power, I would say that although doing 10 years at Goldman, like my job as a teacher was literally the best job ever. But nonetheless, yes, I bumped up to like 48,000. I'm working in Century City, which is like a high-end area, right? I got a business card, I got like a little bit of experience. Like I'm a consultant. I'm traveling all over the place, right? Like I'm doing all these billables and like I'm working with these firms and my job was a young guy, right? Like I was literally like to your age, like I'm talking to people that have been in business. Like I'm advising people that have been in business longer than I was on this earth. Literally, right? So it was a very humbling experience to that point. But then it came a point where like the world was like, the world's getting ready to fall apart financially, right? You see people getting mortgages because I'm covering these mortgage guys. And I had to personally make a decision. Did I want to either get a PhD, continue my psychology training, get a PhD in psychology to stay within the field, or if I wanted to get an MBA? And I made the right choice, man. I just decided to get an MBA. So I ended up applying to business school and I applied to business school. Hopefully we can kind of go down this path. I was purely thinking consulting.
You were thinking,
I was purely thinking consulting.
You're thinking like management consulting I went
to work. Yeah, great. You beat me to it. So I wanted to work at like a Bain or a McKinsey.
Yeah.
Right. Like I wanted to be like, like a strat consultant, like you said, out of this like very narrow aspect consulting to more broad. Right.
And tell me before, it looks like you did something at UCLA called MBA prep or post-bac. Tell me why you felt that just to give you a little bit of grounding in the finance stuff before applying, or is that something you recommend, or did that help you kind of?
Yeah, so it was definitely beneficial to me in a sense that it was and still is a highly coveted program. It's called UCLA the Reardon program. But they have like the scholars, which is for high school kids, and the fellows, which is like basically post-bac as you described. And it's been around since the 80s. It was founded by Mayor Richard Reardon at the time. He was the mayor, he passed away. But nonetheless, it's like to bring kids who have never had exposure to finance on campus to UCLA's Anderson School of Business. And you're there one Saturday at the month, commit a full Saturday. They kind of walk you through, if you're a high schooler, they walk you through, SAT prep, stock pitch and everything else. If you're post-bac, you're doing like GMAT prep, you're doing like industry kind of like chats. You're doing like
how do you get into that? Do you pay for it?
You got to compete. Yeah, no, you have to apply and you're selected. They primarily focus on people that are first generation that have never, that don't have anybody that's gone through the university process. And it was a rewarding experience because like that in that instance, that's when I'm starting to finally come across people that work in finance, right? And like I did it kind of indirectly to my job, but like that wasn't the industry that I covered. Mm-hmm. But like now, they would have the people on the board that were hedge fund managers that would come in and kind of talk to us and provide exposure to this population of, young people that never really had it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm a big supporter and fan of the written program now. They're doing great work. They create a lot of talent.
Yeah, they got our
Especially like
courses now because of you.
yeah, exactly. There's so many kids, man, that are like, from like underserved areas within, LA that get bused. They get bused to the Anderson School of Business. They end up going like the Yales and the Harvards of the world. And they would probably have gotten in on their own. Who knows? Like they wouldn't have the exposure had it not been for Reardon. So I was able to see that as an adult. And just like expose them to, like, so before that, I'd never been on Anderson, like in the Anderson School of Business. I had people that went to UCLA and I would kind of hang out on campus every once in a while, but like it puts you in the seat. So you're able to envision yourself there. And it sounds like something that's very basic, but the reality is like for a lot of people, young people out there, like they've never really seen themselves in that capacity. So
like to even get an MBA, it's like kind of whatever. And so like it's just sitting there, kind of getting a little bit of the exposure, doing the GMAT prep there on campus. It kind of
like going there, like navigating the building, and then they match you up with other like current Anderson students that will be your mentors, right? So like, it was just a great experience. And then so what they require, not the require, what they recommend is that you do Reardon first, and then you apply the next year. But me, I'm always kind of clicking, right? I'm doing everything quickly like an idiot. Now I'll say I was an idiot because it was challenging, man, because the Reardon program was exhausting. It's like I was working in consulting, doing Reardon, and applying to business school concurrently, and studying for my GMAT all in one, right? These are the things that
your weekends were ruined. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what? Like I gave the full Saturday was dedicated to Reardon. Anyways, then we had there were so many projects outside of the program, like community service projects, and meeting with your team. My GMAT, everything else, right? Like it would have been better to delay a year. But nonetheless, like I knew I wanted to hurry me get out, go to business school. Just like study for my GMAT. Yeah, I always tell people like, really commit yourself and study as best as possible so that you can only do it once, right? And like, because you don't want to,
I had to do it twice. Want to make sure, I did it twice.
Yeah, no, dude, but no, for sure. But you want to make sure, and I probably should have done it twice. Like I snuck in and, got lucky and got in, right? But the reality is like you don't want to feel like you left anything on the field because it's such a it's a big investment, man. Like you're missing out socially with your friends, and to do it kind of half-hearted, it's like then you got to do it again.
Yeah, do it once, like do it right.
Commit
hours on the weekends to
and it's easy to lie to yourself and to tell yourself that you're studying, that you're putting forth the time. Like you really have to like commit yourself. So for those individuals that are in the audience that are thinking about going to graduate school of any sorts, this is actually like the most opportune time, right? Because like the world, it's unfortunate, but the world is like slowing down, right? And it's like you're not missing out on anything socially. So this is the opportunity, like for those that are thinking about like going to graduate school, study for your exams. If you're thinking about picking up a new skill, it's a great time to do it, right? Thinking about picking up a language, whatever the case may be, or really like to stretch yourself a bit. But no, man. So I did that. Reardon was great. It opened me up to even thinking about applying to Anderson, which is the UCLA's School of Business.
Yep.
I knew that I wanted to go away. So I'm through and through a West Coast kid. Like literally,
you hadn't traveled, so you wanted to.
I traveled a bit domestically, and like I was very active with like I'm still like with my fraternity brothers, like my fraternity. So I would travel a lot for that, right? But like in terms of like I was like a sunshine West Coast kid, very immersed in LA culture, and just like I'd have been content just kind of being there had I not come across these resources or people in my life that kind of showed me something different. So once I saw something different, I'm like, well, geez, like there are people on the East Coast that are just doing well, right? In terms of like kind of where like how I wanted to do it, like especially like finance is just bigger, and like I think business is just bigger on the East Coast, and we can kind of debate that back and forth. LA is obviously
I'm an East Coast guy, so I'm not going to argue with you.
I don't want to talk negatively about LA.
No, it's true. Finance is just there's a bigger market out east.
Yeah, I think it's like, and LA is driven by Hollywood and entertainment, right? So if your aspirations are Hollywood and entertainment, come over. People are coming over in droves, but like anything outside of that. It's like LA is not big in oil and gas, right? So it's like, all right, like you want to be an oil and gas maker, you move down to Texas, right? Yeah, but it's like those are like that's like the realities of the world. Whereas so like I'm like if I want to be a suit of any sort, then it's like I should probably kind of look at at least spending a couple years out east because I can always come back to LA, right? So ended up applying to schools out on the East Coast, and
how did you think about which schools you applied to?
Yeah, man. I have
Were you were thinking consulting, right? So were you looking just like what
I was
places?
thinking consulting. So, I think it's important. Like when you do these chats, and when I I have the privilege of like talking to people all the time, they always kind of want to ask them like my insights, my experience, and I think it's incumbent. It's my responsibility to kind of set the stage and making sure that I'm talking like straight math and giving like straight facts in the sense that like I hate when people like are locking in the stories in situations that can't be replicated.
Yeah,
Right. So like I want to make sure that everything I'm telling you or that's being told is something that you can literally kind of like follow the same formula
yeah,
and you can really do it. Now it'll come full circle when I talk about my experience when I was a banker at Goldman. But nonetheless, yeah. So when I was thinking about when I was in high school, I was a mediocre student, right? But mind you, I was a year ahead. Like I didn't like I kind of clicks now,
yeah.
right? But
You're
I was
young.
literally like,
You're probably
yeah.
immature because you're a
I
year
was
ahead.
immature. I
Yeah,
was running the streets. I didn't really have much guidance in the house. Like I was like, yeah, but I thought I was old because like there was nobody to report to. But nonetheless, like I had like um, yeah, low twos, right? And like I got
yeah,
in when I got into school, it was like through a program that was like it's for people like it was like educational opportunity program. Where, like we're giving you a chance, like you got to take these classes, like to get up to speed, and like that's the commitment you have to make. I did it, and when I went to college, that's when I like that was my first time seeing academic success. Like literally, like I just like it's something that's kind of clicked, right? And it was like,
yeah.
well, I can do this.
Yeah,
I'm
you
in a
did real
position.
well. You did real well in college.
Yeah, no, yeah. So like, yeah, man. So like, I quote unquote like geeked out. Like I had like a three. I had like a 3.8 when I graduated, or 3.73, whatever the case may be. Double major. I was like president of the anthropology club. Like through my fraternity, like the highest GPA in our
What do you think
region.
clicked? What do you think clicked when you got there? Was it just like, man, like I want to get that job. I want to do well and land something.
No, it was nothing
You
like that.
equate it
No,
to a
it was
job. What? Why? Why do you think
no,
you?
it was no job. Like undergrad, it was just more so like me applying me like literally taking the time to study. Like legitimately, like so, like my, people say, "Oh, I didn't really study for my SATs." Like I literally didn't study. I mean, like literally, right? So like that doesn't mean like I'm encouraging other people to do that, right? Like my life is my life. There were doors that were opened up for me, and like what I always tell people is like I got lucky. I was smart. Genuinely, I was a smart kid, but like I just got
Yeah,
lucky, right? Like sometimes I was in the right place, at the right time. Many instances, I was like not in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Where
right,
there are people that were smarter than me that just happened to kind of make the wrong decisions, right?
right,
And so
right.
like there's a little bit of guilt about that, but nonetheless, no, man. I think I remember distinctly actually. So to take a step back even further, before I went to Long Beach, I actually went to San Diego State first. So San Diego State was a school I got accepted to. It was like highly coveted among like all the Cal States. And it was impacted. I mean, like it's hard to get into. It was like 30,000 students, and I was actually homesick. So meaning like I was only there. I went there for summer school. I went there for the fall semester, and I went there for like what's called a J term, like the winter session.
Yeah,
And I was already on my way back to Long Beach. Like because it was such a new environment. Like the high school that I went to, 4,200 kids at the high school, literally in a urban area next to like public housing, right? And it was just like, and it was a very different demographic and environment versus San Diego State, which San Diego is beautiful. I want to live in San Diego now. My firm is headquartered there, but like I want to get a boat and kind of chill, but like it was a different mindset. So like when I was at San Diego State, I was just like, I was coming back to Long Beach every weekend, like because that's what I knew. But the reason why I bring it up is that I remember explicitly I think I was talking to one of my classmates, and she said, "Hey, are you a football player here?" I'm like, "I'm not a freaking football player." Like, I was tiny then. I wasn't even 6 feet then, right? I'm like no, like I'm not here because I'm a football player. Like I'm like I kind of deserve to be here, although I didn't, but I kind of did, right? And it's like, that's almost 20 years later. Like that still resonated with me today. I was like she thinks I'm here just because I'm a ball player. So like I literally excelled in that summer. Like that was that summer program going into it. I
So
got like
you think her saying that to you kind of
I think I
like,
think I
wait
think
a
that I
second,
think I
like
think
I'm here because
yeah.
I can be here.
And,
All right.
I'm like producing grades, right? It's like
Yeah.
like I took two classes. I think one was like economics, like an A and a B plus, and then like I like excelled when I was there for the fall semester, excelled in the winter session. So when I came back to Long Beach, I was already just like on it, right? And like already like I can do this, and I just navigated college very quickly. I think looking back to answer your question, I was talking to my friends about this a couple of days ago, is that it would have benefited me tremendously, maybe to take a year off, not a year off, to like go study abroad, take a gap year, whatever the case may be, right? Or maybe even like, to be quite candid about it, transfer to a more competitive school. Because the reality is like I was like killing it from a GPA perspective, but like, maybe I should have thought about going to like transfer to like a UCLA, right? Or to
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
an Ivy or like
Or a
going out east.
Berkeley even or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. But life is all about exposure. And so I wasn't exposed to that. And like,
Yeah.
the guys in my circle didn't have the exposure themselves to say, hey, you're doing so well. you should probably kind of like think about doing something different. Like now I'm that guy for a lot of my little bros. I'm that guy. Like, hey, you're doing so well. You should think about applying to school, or you should think about getting an internship when you're in college, as opposed to just getting a job. Like, right. Yeah, like I jobs paid like to work at the bookstore, whatever the case may be. But like when you get an internship opportunity to like get a career post graduation, and I didn't have that. I don't know what your experience was when you graduated from college. But nonetheless, I say that because I just didn't have the exposure. I didn't really have.
I was an assistant yoga instructor, yoga manager at a studio for my junior year summer.
I would actually appreciate that now.
I was working. I was making money.
I don't stretch enough now. So I need that's one of the skills to teach.
No, I mean I wasn't doing the actual yoga. I can't even touch my toes. But I was like helping run the shop or whatever.
But I would start to be like some of my friends like interning at like not like friends of friends like interning at corporations, right? So that once they and getting paid well, so then once they graduated, they had a job. It's like that's a very East Coast thing, bro. And we talk about that. We go back and forth. We literally were in this debate. My friends like in New York, there are kids that just like know about finance. They know about these careers, and they see it
after freshman year, man.
Exactly, right. And it's just like, and they know it, about it. Once they're in college, they're already teed up. They got like they already have modeling skills. They can show you the DCF model or like an idea that they have. So it's just very different. So long story short, to answer your question, and I know we didn't get distracted, but I was just trying to give you some context. Like when I was thinking about which B school to go to, I just wanted an MBA. Like I literally just had this kind of like I would have got an MBA from like any of the Cal State schools or any of the UCs that were local, right?
You ended up at a great school. Like when you get into other schools and like
I did.
Go to Darden.
Yeah, no, I did. And so like, but to the point is like I think Reardon really helped me because it shaped me that hey, you have a similar profile to the other kids that are in this program. They've had a track record of like but like people have gone through the program and have gone to great business school programs as well, right? So like if I didn't have that exposure, I'd have been fully content. And there's nothing wrong with an MBA from one of those schools I described. Like that would have been it for me, right? And
it doesn't open up as many doors, let's be real, right?
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. And so it doesn't, but it's like in order to know about it, you have to have doors open for you and have it. So it's like a vicious cycle, man. You have to have like
it's getting worse because the recruiting's even younger now out of college.
Exactly.
So like there's kids freshman year. I'm like, how are the freshmen supposed to know like who aren't fed it from like, an early age in high school?
So two things. One is that I think what you're doing, I think this is great because it kind of like breaks down the walls, right? And like in terms of like just having like
14 years.
Yeah. Like exposure, opening up doors, and like it's readily available. And I in the conversation I always have is that my little ones, their mom's from LA. She's an attorney, right? She went to UCLA, went to Georgetown Law School. Their dad is like went to this school, went to this school, was a banker, and like the conversations that they're privy to, it puts them light years ahead of their classmates, right? Like at the dinner table, we're talking about they know what dad does. He's raising capital, like they know these stuff. Like I didn't know that growing up, right? And so like. That's exposure. So when we're talking about like the schools that they want to go to, like my daughter will say she's in public school now, but her public school, she's in the French program, and it's like the content is 95% French, right? Cool. If you ask to go to the bathroom, it's like French, right?
Yeah.
And so she's like, I want to go to UCLA, not because her mom went there, because they have a French program, and she's 8. But like to think about that, it's like I wasn't. Like, it's just very different. So exposure plays a big difference. So then going back to your question, so when I was deciding between the schools that I got into. Obviously I had good insights from like the Reardon folk. There were other programs that I was involved in. There were other people that I kind of like found myself interacting with that were in the business school circle, getting their opinions. And what I will say about business school is that people will tell you that the best business school is the school that they went to, period. Right? Like, it's like literally like every school is great. Like legitimately every school is great, but like people are like, you drink the Kool-Aid once you're there, especially, and you're like, this is awesome. Yeah. And this is like the best school ever. Like I wouldn't have gone anywhere else. Like, no, you would have probably gone somewhere else but it's like you decide to go. So like to answer that, Darden is the best school ever, right? Where I went, but nonetheless, there are a bunch of great schools out there. I gave a really strong lift to Cornell. I love Johnson. They had a great culture. I was kind of chasing the idea of like an Ivy League degree. It was in New York. But it was just like it was very remote. Although UVA is very remote too, in Charlottesville.
But the weather's not as bad.
Yeah, weather's not as bad, and it's just like I think.
No, Darden's great, man. They're both great. You couldn't go wrong with either.
Yeah, and then at the time, I was like, I was in dating or not engaged. Like, at the time, my girlfriend or fiance at the time was like, she had already graduated from Georgetown Law. So it's like, it made even more sense to go from Charlottesville to DC as opposed to go to like Ithaca to DC, right? On my free nights. But no, man, the Darden, what I appreciated most about, like, so chose Darden, what I appreciated most about was like this sense of community, small classes, 300 people.
How many was
right?
like when you're actually flying on the plane going East Coast? And like,
Yeah,
do you remember that? Like, were you nervous? Or you like, oh my God?
Yeah, I was pretty geeked, man. I was excited. It was, once I got accepted, once I got my materials and so forth, like there was an education component to it in terms of me just kind of telling my friends in LA the significance of it. And like, it's a competitive school, like, and beyond rankings and just like, because in their eyes, and that's like, this is what we're exposed to. It's like, why not just go to get an MBA at XYZ University right down the street from us, right? It's like, and you can, but like, to your point, it opens up different doors. And it's a very delicate conversation, right? Because like, you don't want to be a jerk by any means. I was just like, it opens up different doors by going there. So like, and everybody was
you're too good for the school.
Yeah. And everybody was super appreciative of it. I mean, they were super supportive. And it's like, I went there and it's like, yeah, I didn't fly straight to Charlottesville. I flew into DC and it kind of got set on and we drove to Charlottesville. Like, I'm getting my apartment set up. And, it's just like, you're on campus. I don't know if you've ever been to UVA's campus, but
once, yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful campus. It has a very distinct culture to it, which is like not LA culture at all. So like, I'm in a polo now, but it's like very like polo boat shoes, and it's like, very it's cool. Preppy. Like, blue blazer, gold buttons, and that was a little bit of a culture shock, right? And plus, like, it was like a quote unquote a true university, whereas like my time at Long Beach was more like a commuter experience. I wasn't living on campus, right? So like, I wasn't fully immersed in the university. I was still back in my neighborhood too when I wasn't in campus, right? Like in Charlottesville, it's like everything is like the town is centered around the university too, which makes it even more like prevalent, right? So I knew some people going in, like, you kind of your networking groups or whatnot, and you get a chance to meet your classmates virtually, and it was a great experience, man. And like, the learning team, I guess in terms of making the choice, I really appreciated the case study method versus the lecture method. So taking a step back, case study method is like, hey, we read a case and like, these are like realistic, like life situations, and you're learning vicariously through the case itself, right? As opposed to saying, hey, here's this textbook, do problems 1 through 30, which is, I grew up learning that way, right? And like, so, Harvard is case method, Darden is case method. Darden kind of prides itself. I think it may be still the case, and it's always like this inside jokes. Like, Darden used to be extremely rigorous. So Darden used to have classes on Saturdays, like literally, right? Yeah. So like literally on Saturdays, and then like the scale down where it's like, no, we're just only gonna have class Monday through Friday, and it's like, and it's like we would pride ourselves on. We still do this. I know that this is like one tradition that they still hold, like reading 100 cases by October. Right? So pushing through 100 case studies, right? Like, school starts in August, I guess. And whereas like most schools probably don't get through, 200 cases within a year, but it's like you have this 100 case party, it's a big event, we pump through 100. They pride themselves in, like, the school's kind of taking a step back because they pride themselves in working really hard. Yeah. And like you earning it, right? But then the reverse of that is like, you end up working so hard and it's hard to get a job because like, you can't do the recruiting. You can't do the recruiting aspect to it.
And so tell me about that. So you get on campus, is it like, okay, I'm going consult. I'm McKinsey, Bainbridge, you do these coffee chats, like, or is what's happened?
Great question. I forgot that part. So like, all my essays were about consulting.
Yeah.
Back at that time, Goldman had a program that was for people that didn't have finance backgrounds, first generation. It was called maybe it was at Week on Wall Street. That wasn't Week on Wall Street. It was Week on Wall Street is a business school thing. I forgot what the program was.
It's not SEO or anything like that.
No, it wasn't that. It was like Goldman Sachs camp. They had a camp.
Okay.
And what they do is like, it's called Goldman Sachs camp. It's a day, and they would have presenters speak and talk about each division of the firm.
Cool.
Sales and trading, investment banking, investment management, and technology, right? And so they'll go, and it's a room of people that are all getting ready, go to business school within a couple of weeks, that are supposed to not like be familiar with finance, right? Like giving them a shot to get familiar with it. So long story short, at the time, there was a partner who ended up talking about investment management, and the way that he described it was like, and this is the way I describe it to this day, is like, you have to be good at good or appreciate 3 kind of aspects of the job. One is that you have to be a people person. So people have to feel comfortable, being around you and like gravitate towards you and like, just, being able to manage relationships. 2, you need to be extremely commercial, right? So thinking about like, if there's somebody that's selling a business that wants to sell a business, like how do you get in front of them, right? Like there's that commercial kind of entrepreneurial element to it.
Mm-hmm.
Three is that you have to be market savvy. And I just have an appreciation for capital markets. I didn't have the third one. I was going to business school for it. But like I had the relationship piece. I was doing executive coaching. I was doing some stuff in undergrad on the like entrepreneurial side in terms of like event production and so forth. So I felt like I can kind of like shake and bake with the rest of them, like cold solution, hand you we're really dating ourselves, like hand you a flyer, right, to come to this event as opposed to like social media kind of broadcasting. But nonetheless, I had two of the three. I was going to business school. I was like, I'm going to get the third one. And I just took a liking to it because it was like, that role within investment manager was like, hey, you're client facing, you're adding value, you got to be sophisticated about finance, but you're not just like in this bubble or in this cube all day, right? Mm-hmm. So when I came back to campus, or when my first day on campus, that's when I knew I was actually going into investment management. Like I knew that it was like my essays were consulting, but like I was already in, and so I was like, now I'm going to investment management. Now I got to like learn about investment management. So like I was like using your site and like sites like yours, and just like really having an understanding of like what's out there, like what does it look like? Because I didn't know, because like I didn't know anybody in that field, right? Besides
investment management at a bulge bracket like that. Tell me like what specific, because it's a broad term, right? Investment management,
great.
Yeah, tell me specifically what you found through that research and kind of what you figured out. Okay, this is what my day to day is actually going to look.
So two things. So even before that, I think it was like I had a consulting engagement in New York. One of my best friends to this day, who like I really got to know when I was going out there. He runs a private equity firm in Florida now. Mm-hmm. And he was there. He was an analyst at JP Morgan getting crushed. And we would hang out. I'm out there in New York. Like I was doing my project and like I'm just out there socially on the weekends. He would party with us until like 3 a.m. and literally go to sleep for 3 hours and then go back to the desk. But he's a smart dude, carried himself a kind of way. He's like a banker. And he was like, and we were talking, like one night he had some time, we were just sitting up talking. And he's like, you would be a really good banker. I'm like, dude, I don't even know what that means. He's like, yeah, like get it, like you understand finance, like yeah, like people just kind of like, well, I describe people like appreciate knowing you, like you're very like cerebral about things, and you have like this consulting kind of mindset, you'll be really good. So like I had an idea of investment banking, even going into like that Goldman Sachs camp. I just know you work really hard, you get crushed, and there's a black car that takes you home, and like you go, like you get in the car
at midnight or 2 a.m. every day.
Yeah, you get free lunch, and it's like, oh, this seems pretty cool, man. It's like I'm a gritty dude, like I work hard like with anybody else. So I had that aspect within finance, like investment banking. Mm-hmm. But then like investment management, it was just very broad. I didn't know like sales and trading, like they kind of throw that at you too. Like, oh, well, maybe I should be doing sales and trading. Or maybe I should be like a traditional industrials banker. Like maybe like not like media and tech, like maybe I should be a media tech investment banker. Maybe I should be. So I ultimately ended up working in private wealth management, right? It's like, oh, you know what? It allows you to work with among all those across those different industries and those different capacities, but I'm managing relationships. I'm actively trading as well, right? I'm facilitating capital flow for business owners and for those that are financial sponsors, so like the PE shops and the VC shops.
But like when you're applying to this job, do you know that that's what you're going to be put in? Like, are your clients are going to be PE firms?
I didn't know. You don't know. No, it's a great question. Thank you for level setting with me. No, I just knew that I was going to be a private wealth advisor, and the goal was to bring capital in to manage it, right, and bring relationships in.
But you knew you were going to be on the phone talking to clients almost every day.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like I knew that, and then so what ends up happening is like the school didn't even start yet, or just started that week. So I knew that going in, and then the recruiting. This is what the recruiting process is like. Mm-hmm. So you're doing your work. You like take a step back. In business school, this is my kind of my comment on it. There are three main goals, right? One is to get great grades, right? 2 is to do a great job, and 3 is to have great relationships, right? You cannot be effective in all three. Maybe there are some unicorns in the world that exist. Yeah. I know 1 or 2 that exist, but like something has to give, especially at a school like Darden. Like you're just like overwhelmed by the work, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, well, geez, man, like I already had great grades. Like I graduated 3.8. A week after I turned 20, literally a week after I turned 20, right? And it's just like, I did double major. Like I already had accolades. Like I'm going to study hard enough, but like I'm not going to get one of like the prestigious awards that my classmates got, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to get a great job, right? Like I'm going to work at the best firm possible. So that means that like whenever they had briefings and so forth, like I was fully present. The follow-up requirements were like, it was cumbersome as well. And the last part is like, developing great relationships. I think you can do like 2 of the 3 really well.
Yeah.
So I was like, the job was the first, plenty of strong relationships. I wish I'd have done a better job of that, even looking back, especially with a lot of my classmates that were international students, right? Because like there's just like they're kind of in their own silo too, right? And it's like there's just so much to learn from them. Like they're eager to be mixed in, and like I couldn't have done a better job and learned a lot from them. But nonetheless, I definitely created some great relationships. And the third was like grades. Like I passed, I graduated, got a degree, it's on the wall. But like it's like for me it was like in the job.
I was the same way at Wharton. I was focusing on almost 100% on like Wall Street Oasis while I was at school. And
you get it.
I would go to class. I'd go to class, and like it was cool, and I was learning and listening. But it wasn't like I was killing myself outside of to prep for the exams or anything like that. It was like I was just absorbing what I could.
Doing enough, right? So it's like so like you need to be on the phone with somebody because you're trying to talk to a New York advisor, and he or she only has so much time. Like you're gonna make yourself available. You're gonna hop out of your learning team. You're gonna hop out of class. And you're gonna do. I don't know if that's what life is like now. Like schools kind of change, and they try to accommodate the students. I don't know what that's like now. Like I said, like the people at Darden, they don't go to school 5 days a week anymore. So like I don't know what that looks like. But nonetheless, when it was my time, like the job came first. So with my approach to actually securing a role, so I looked at like Goldman, I looked at JP, and was like fully committed to those. I looked at Credit Suisse as well when back then.
But all PWM, like you knew this was it.
All PWM. I looked at JP. I got a lot of traction from JP, real estate investment banking.
Mm-hmm.
The recruiter was like very friendly with me. I forgot. I know his name. I won't say his name, but he had a French name too. And maybe he thought I was French. My family's from I'm from LA, but like from Louisiana. I don't speak French. My daughter will speak French. I don't speak French, but nonetheless, he took a liking to me. He's like, you should really be a investment banker, like real estate. And it felt great because like the thing about like business school is like such like a mind play. It's just like it's somebody giving you a little bit of love, like, hey, you should do this, and you kind of go, well, who gives you the most love? And I had to really like catch myself, like, yeah, man, I can go that route. But the reality is, like, my classmates that are going that route are light years ahead of me in their familiarity with banking. Because a lot of people, what ends up happening is that you'll have a lot of kids in the class that were bankers prior to, and they're trying to upscale in terms of the types of banks that they're working. Right, so maybe they were a small boutique.
You almost didn't go real estate investment banking because you felt like there was no way
I would get the offer.
Yeah, you get an offer.
I would get the full-time offer. They would give me a summer.
Yeah, right? But then you might flame out during the summer or whatever.
Dude, I was literally doing Excel like this.
Yeah, I know.
Right, like literally doing Excel
And I hear you, and like so there was a little bit of that, like you knew kind of where you were at relative to your peers. Yeah. There was a little bit of like I'm not even going to go there. Although I'll say with associates, they're a little bit more.
The analysts are like sad. I think I don't know if this is what you're getting. I was my analysts are the smartest people I ever worked with. Like, analysts when I was at Goldman took my job and done my job extremely like would have been better at it than I am. Right. So like I think there's a little bit of like patience and like a little bit of grace that's allotted to associates. I don't know if that's what you're going to get to.
Exactly. Like especially technically for people who aren't former bankers. So like I feel like people listening that are thinking, oh man, I'm so far behind on the modeling and all this stuff. Yes, it is a weak point for you. Yeah. If you're a really good leader like you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be a great banker, especially at the C.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, so that's the thing, right? So like, I was like, I was still like, I was young, but I've always been mature. So like I was able to take a step back and say, look, they're going to hire for this skill set, right? This is one component. This is what you got to do day to day. But like, I knew that, and this is what attracted me to the recruiter. Like I knew I can add the most value if I was like in that VC, MDC, and like I'm driving business, right? And like, I'm like literally like orchestrating deals, but like in order to get there, you got to do you got to at least align yourself with an analyst that can help you.
You got to throw away your mouse a little bit, like
exactly, right. And so mind you, like to put more things in context, right? And probably very similar to what's going on in the world now. Like that was 2007, 2008.
Oh my god.
Right. So like I was a summer associate in 2008. So like I would have had to be opportunities were even more thin, right? Because like so now like it's hyper competitive to get an offer. So like I think I made the best decision in terms of going traditional private wealth because it as opposed to like the way you can look at it is like an investment making proper. You're not really client facing in my opinion, and you can kind of gut check me on this and the audience can as well. Is like you're not really client facing until like you're a VP MD, right? Sure. Like that's me. Like you really.
I mean, you'll go on the meetings and stuff like that.
But you're not saying much, right?
You're not running deals. You're not running.
Unless asked, right? And like it depends, right? But nothing is absolute. These are kind of like relative statements, right? But then within private wealth, you literally own the relationship day one, whatever relationship you bring in. Right. So, and I'll talk to you about my first couple clients, like literally day one, like that's your relationship. And like you talk. So like the way to think about it is that when I came out of business school and I was an investment advisor in New York, it's like my classmates are like, oh, this is the CEO of our company, X, Y, Z. And like, they would kind of kowtow to him, right? And for me, it's like, give me their email. Let me find their email address. I'm going to cold email them right now. Right. Like, it was like, my mind was like, it's so distorted there because like everybody is accessible. You think everybody's they're not accessible. Like everybody's approachable.
You weren't intimidated. You're not intimidated at all. And so like that was a huge advantage for you for PWM because
at all. You have to be like, you got to be comfortable just like reaching out.
Yeah.
And mind you, with that said, you know, the business is done. It's purely a relationship business. So I was able to do it. It's like, it's hard to be tremendous.
You're there for a decade at Goldman. So tell me what's going on there.
So I had a great summer as in business school, came back, got the offer. They wanted me to go to Philadelphia. I'm a huge Eagles fan. But at that time, I wanted to be in DC because I said, the one I was dating at the time was in DC. I wanted to be in DC, grow a practice. There was a new office, but they weren't established enough. They didn't have enough resources there. So they wanted you to be in Philly and kind of live there for a year until the DC office was built out. I love the birds, but like I couldn't do it. Right? I couldn't do Philly. I couldn't ask. My girlfriend at the time was like she was licensed to practice in DC by being barred in California, so she would have to take the PA bar. So like I didn't want to do it. So the partner in New York who ran the program was like, hey, you should think about working. Like you can work in New York, you can work back in LA. I knew I didn't want to do it in LA. I didn't have any relationships that were going to benefit me in LA. I wanted to be in New York. I wanted to be to say that I worked on Wall Street, or at least be East Coast, kind of going back to that point, right?
Of course, yeah.
So he gave me an opportunity to come to New York. Like I never lived in New York, didn't have any relationships, didn't go to school, any schools in New York, right?
Yeah.
Didn't work in any firms there. And the only thing they gave me great training for sure. But like what they ended up giving you was a desk and a business card, and they tell you to go rock out, right? And so tell me about
the pay jump too.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was a baller, man. So like back then, it was like I think when I left consulting, maybe it was like I was doing like by the time I left, I was probably like doing 55. I don't even think I hit 60. But nonetheless, mind you, to put things in perspective though, right? Like at that time, even from when I first got my first job at 30,000, like my parents didn't make more than like collectively the household was probably like 40. Right, I really like because my mom, like she was the main income. She probably made 28, right? So like I was already up when I graduated, right?
Yeah,
and then, like when I worked in consulting, like I'm like now I got a business card, so like I'm up even more. And then like anyways, when I came out of business school, what was our contracts back then? It was maybe it was like 100 base and like 50 bonus. 50 like I saw 50 in the check. I'm like, dude, this is incredible, right? It's like I'm never like a signer was 50, whatever. It was some number. Maybe after tax was 30, whatever the case may be. And like I was like, this is nuts, right? Like I'm never like mine just more than like my household. Like this is crazy. So so like the math was like I think it was like 150 all in. This is back in 09. That was like standard across the street.
The fact that you had a job in 09 coming out of business school is pretty good.
Oh, dude, take a step back. So mind you gotta be mindful. Like I was a summer associate, had a great summer, and you typically when you're a summer associate, you get your offer like indications like 2 weeks after. Right, like you just know, like they're like, hey, or like even like the day you kind of shake hands, like look forward to seeing you next year, right, in the fall, like after you graduate, right, like you're getting an offer. Everybody was silent, and nobody could say anything, and like their HR recruiters were changing because like some of them were losing their job. It was just a very crazy place in the fall of 08, right? I saw the stock price go down to $60. I think it was like 160 before then, right? It's like the world was literally falling apart. And here I am looking for an offer. I'm like, well, I need to probably start looking at backup firms because they haven't conveyed to me if I'm going to get an offer. They're trying to keep us at bay, like, yeah, don't do it. Yeah, like stick with us. And like the other firms that I didn't take an offer from, they're reaching out and they're engaging me a bit like, hey, you should think about working with us. You didn't summer with us, but we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
So I waited, got the offer, came back. And, the math worked out well. I was very pleased by having an offer, and it's like one of my friends was saying like, yeah, like they just don't give jobs away in a recession. Like this, like there's not like, hey, because you're a neighborhood kid, let's give you this job. Like, no, you got to earn, like you literally got to earn it. Everybody's losing their, everybody's
So
losing
how did you do that over the summer? How do you think you got that return offer in such a horrible year, the worst possible year to graduate?
Yeah, I was
the worst summer. I mean, because like I'm surprised they didn't rescind a lot of offers, right? So
yeah, so I even to this day, man, I think I never worked harder in my life than I did when I was a summer associate. Because what ends up happening is that you can't really do too much, especially within investment management. Like you're not licensed, so you can't trade, right? So like you're at the desk, you're like helping building models and like building decks or whatnot, and like there's a lot of training throughout the day. And then at night in the morning, like you're reading up on the markets because you're getting grilled all the time. Like they're having like these open meetings where like there's like, tell me what you're in the strategy, right? Like you're like on the spot and like you gotta be comfortable. Like I got that because I was a Darden case method. Like we kind of got that part, right? But yeah, like, you're just exhausted because like you always have to be on, like you're always selling yourself. You can't really be comfortable, and you're like, so like by the time I got home, bro, I was done. Like I just, I graded it out. I was sharp. I made tons of great relationships. Even through the recruiting process, I had tons of great relationships at those firms, and I pride myself on this to this day. I did a tremendous job in terms of following up, and did this concept called and I want to get back to, I won't distract us, but there's this concept called triangulation that was taught to me. I was already doing it. It's like, hey, you introduced me to one of your friends that's in the Bay, and you say, hey, Pierre, you should really talk to this person. We'll call him Rob. You should really talk to Rob. I reach out to Rob, have a great conversation. We're talking about whatever business topic. What I'll do from there, I'll ask Rob, like, hey, Rob, are there 2 to 3 other people that I should chat with that you think will be a good fit, right? Rob will introduce me to 2 or 3 other people. I come back to you and say, hey, Pat, had a great conversation with Rob. We talked about X, Y, and Z. He also introduced me to 2 to 3 other people, right? I reach out to the 2 to 3 other people, have a great conversation with them, go back to Rob and say, hey, Rob, talk to the 2 to 3 other people. We had a great conversation. These are the things we talked about. Come back to you like, hey, Pat, had those conversations with the 2 to 3 other people. Things are going well. This is I'm progressing, right? And so like by the time when those 2 to 3 people talk to Rob, there's already that connection. Like, oh yeah, Pierre told me the conversation was great. Or by the time that Rob chats with you, like, that I chatted with Rob, I chatted with 2 to other 3 people, and they're like, it keeps my name top of mind, right? I'm not asking more time from you, right? It's like, hey, I'm
just keeping them updated.
Note. Yeah, short note, like, hope you're well, happy holidays, whatever. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'll keep you posted and let you know like how the internships are working out. So anyways, by the time I have, this is what I should mention, by the time I actually did my interview for Goldman, my official, like, so you do your preliminaries, like your like it's like a hour meeting or whatever. Then you have your on-campus interviews. But like you're sitting in a room and you're like, they're long-winded interviews. By the time I had my on-campus interviews, it was like me kind of like this, like this chopping it up with guys I already knew, right? Because like I was already in cadence with them, and I put so much effort on the front end. Like I wasn't really focusing on school as much as I should have. Yeah. Where like they already knew me. I'm talking about like not necessarily their family, but like their family. Like like what are you doing? Like how's X, Y, and Z going? And I'm building off of every story too. Like I've always done a great job of that. So like I knew the business because I was like leveraging their stories. So then by the time I interviewed, it was more of a conversation.
Yeah, you were talking about, oh well, Rob told me this, and I know you guys do that, and so you're able to kind of pull from all those conversations rather than it being like they're grilling you on the markets necessarily.
And as opposed to me coming in and say, tell me about your job, right? Like I want to learn about. It's like no, like you got to put forth the effort. So
that means when you were getting that, you did that. So when you said the on-campus interviews, are you talking about when you first got on a campus, you were like networking right away with all these people? Or
with network. Yeah. So you reach out to people like, hey, I'm interested. And so I literally just made a note to myself. This is what I want to talk about. So triangulation is one kind of like nugget that's worth like keeping in mind. The other one is this concept of having like safe stories or safe conversations. And what that means is that when you approach, whether you're on campus, whatever you're looking for a job, this was my process. I didn't know much about finance, right? It didn't make sense for me to talk directly with an MD or a group lead, right? It just doesn't. Like, it's great. It sounds cool. Like, oh, I chatted with, like, you talking to your classmates. Everybody's like hyper competitive to get a job. Like, I talked to this MD, like, I'm good. Like, I would have messed up, right? Yeah. So for me, it was like, I want to have a safe conversation. So the first thing I did was actually I talked to my classmates, same year as me, that worked in investment management before going into business school. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the experience. Let me ask all the quote unquote dumb questions now and kind of like get a cadence going, right? Yeah. Then I scaled up and I talked to the second years, the people that just summered or maybe they worked in the prior to, had those conversations, right? Then talked to the people that recently graduated from Darden. And these are Darden people, right? So like they have some affinity to me. They're going to listen to me, right? And they're going to show me a little bit of love, a little bit of grace, right? And they kind of worked my way up within the Darden pipeline. Then like once I kind of worked my way up to Darden, I started branching out. And you can talk to VPs of other schools, right? Yeah. But I already have this cadence and like this skill set, this knowledge base that's structured, and I have the stories that I can leverage, and I'm triangulating at the same time.
When you say stories you can leverage, tell the listeners what you mean by that.
Just like you have a more fine-tuned understanding of the business, right? The nuances, like in terms of so one of the questions, like, how are you going to go about building your business? And it's not elementary. Like you have to be really thoughtful about it. So like you have to say, like, I can't say that, hey, be in New York, that I want to cover. Although I worked in oil and gas, I want to cover oil and gas bankers. Like there's not a big population of oil and gas wealth in New York City, right? So like the story has to align with the market that you're in.
So when did you actually know to like say, when they would ask you those questions, when did you have a good answer to that?
They would allude that you had to have a business plan, but then so I was concurrently creating my quote unquote business plan as I was going, right? Knowing that I was going to have one at some point.
This brings me back to what you said around when they bring you in full time, they just give you a phone and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you rock out.
It's like you have to do your thing. Tell the
Yeah.
listeners, what does that mean? Like, who are you calling? Are they giving you numbers? What the heck
No,
is
they don't give you
happening?
anything. Yeah, they don't give you anything. There's no role. There's no list of numbers to call. It literally is.
You just got the business card
You
with
look.
the good name on it.
Yeah, yeah. You're looking through the paper. You're looking for deals that have been done. You're looking for the top 50 real estate developers, top 50 hedge fund managers, top 100. And you're calling on them. Every other firm is calling on them. Your colleague who's right next to you is calling on them as well. And you're just trying to insert yourself in the relationship. So, and it's like, for me, like, started thinking through what's my background and what market makes the most sense. I'm like, well, I worked in consulting, maybe like corporate executives, like, there's some stock value that needs to be managed and so forth. They can bring that over. I did a little bit of media and tech consult when I was I covered that industry. So maybe I'll talk to media is present in New York. So maybe I can do a little bit of that. There's like a strong intermediary network in terms of getting introduced. But you literally, so you have to be mindful of the audience and like the market that you're in. So like energy banking wouldn't make sense, right? Or any other kind of like unique or nuanced industry, it doesn't make sense. It has to be like prevalent. So it has to be a viable business, right? So like
enough of a big enough market wherever you're at to actually generate the revenue that you need to support yourself.
Yeah, so you just gotta be thoughtful. You gotta understand the space that you're playing in.
How do you, coming from no backgrounds, no connections? I mean, you had some connections within the firm and a little bit across Wall Street. How did you come in there, and how did you what was this business plan? Give me a little taste of it.
Yeah, so for me, it was like literally media and tech, corporate executives, leveraging intermediaries, so like attorneys. And so I knew a little bit of that community.
Were you just trying to get them to bring their money over to Goldman?
Yeah, so the goal was like literally to bring their money over, or to bring their interest in raising capital, like on IPO and whatever the case, to make sure that they do it through Goldman. Right. Yeah. And so like once they cashed out and took risk off the table, then I would be there to manage the money as well. Right.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
So my approach there was I ended up covering a bunch of smaller firms, calling on like a bunch of early revenue, like companies that were probably doing like $10, $30 million in revenue. They weren't viable clients, right? Like you go to an IPO, you need a couple more zeros behind you, right? And they didn't have much liquidity to be managed, but I would treat them like as if they were a $300 million client.
Yeah.
And I would do all the heck, because I had time, right? And I would treat them and like I was investing in their business, their success. And what ended up happening, why and how it carries over to what I'm doing now, is that I created so many relationships with middle market bankers, because they weren't big enough for Goldman, but I was giving those guys deal flow. Right. Because like, I'm like, okay, like Goldman can't do it, but like you could transact, you're private equity, you could transact for them. So I created a strong network in that space. And then like in those instances, like those guys had their balance and girls had their balance sheets that needed to be managed as well. So I was doing that for them. But man, I was calling anybody and everybody. And it was like literally banging my head against the wall. I would not recommend that approach to the population. It can be done.
What do you recommend? What do you recommend? I mean, was it unfair to expect success from a kid that had no background in finance except for the MBA, and just giving you a phone and a business card, or is that kind of
no? So this, I was talking to one of my good friends. He was because
you were there for 10 years, man. I mean, so like, tell me about the progression. Like the first couple of years were brutal. Yeah,
it was painful. Yeah, I would say, all 8 of the 10 were painful. It was painful because that business is based on having relationships, right? And the harsh realities of the world, and this is about like, what can you replicate? People like to do business with people that are like them, that went to the same school. Like, oh, West Coast guys are like, hey, you're a passer, I'm a passer, I'm a Ball Street ball. Like, it's like, if you're not of that world or that environment, it's not impossible. There's a difference between what's possible and what's probable, right? Yeah. Everything is possible, right? What's probable is a bit more challenging, right? And to put the cards on the table, and my friend would appreciate it. We literally had this conversation last night. I think in that space, private wealth, high net worth, it's hard for a kid who grew up with minimal means, extremely poor, to be successful in that business, because at the end of the day, when you're talking to these clients, like they didn't necessarily grow up like that. Not some have, like these are like, these aren't absolutes, but the majority of them didn't, right? And like their interests won't necessarily align with how you grew. I didn't know anything about question writing when I was a kid. Right? I know about question writing now, right? I didn't know anything about golf. Yeah, I didn't know anything about rowing crew as a kid. Like now, like it's the competitive. This the cat watching the cat
squash crew, equestrian. Yeah. You're like, shit, I gotta go play squash.
Yeah, the guy behind me, he was actually it was crazy because like there's a little bit of like the ethnicity, racial demographic to it. Like he was a person of color. He was a rock star squash, right? But he grew up in the East Coast, went to all the boarding schools, and like that. He's at the club, you know, like that's a very different environment than how I grew up, right? And so like
totally different.
Yeah, so it's like it's not like so. There's probable versus possible. So like. Like probability versus a possibility. So like it's possible to be like, but the probability of like not having those means and like not having those shared experiences make it challenging because at the end of the day, people want to give business to people that are like them, that are like that they see them at the club or that, hey, where did you spend your weekend? Right? I was on the boat or I was out east. And like that wasn't necessarily.
I get it. It makes sense. It makes sense. They want to be able to connect with their advisor or whatever. So tell me about like, so your progression. Like it sounds like the first couple of years probably were brutal. Like bringing in very little.
It was all cold calling and like the cold. If you ask somebody like a successful advisor, like how they get their book of business, it's not going to be the cold calling, right? Yeah. It's like, it's not, 95% is like 98% is like the people that they already knew, getting introduced to a family friend, an old colleague, old classmate and whatnot. Right. Yeah. But that's the only lever I had was to like bang my head against the wall. And so like, the reason why I'm adamant about like, tell stories that can be replicated, because I remember sitting in the room, I'm like 2 to 3 years in, I brought in some business, not enough. I probably brought in a little bit of business, but everybody's like chomping at the bit, right? And one of these guys that was at the firm, he was getting touted, like everybody was a fan of him because he was bringing in business. And I'm like, I'm in the meetings, like all the new associates. I'm like, look, and then they were like, bragging about this guy's win because they want to encourage you to keep doing it. I get it, right? They want to encourage you to keep trying and like trying to win business. And I was frustrated because working plenty of weekends, like trying to get my list together to cold call and whatnot.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, person XYZ, you tell us about the deal you won. That's great. Congrats. High five. I'm like, you know what? Like, let's dig a little bit deeper. Like, how'd you get the win? Right? Like, and I wasn't being a jerk about it, but like, because I want to be able to replicate it. Like I'm banging my head against the wall.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's.
And what did he or she say?
Dude, but you got to remember, like, so this is like 09, 2010. People hated Wall Street. They hated banks then, right? You're like, so I'm calling like, and like Goldman has a name, like it was like people hated all bankers. Like they hated Wall Street, right? There was like this disdain about it. And he was like, oh, well, I got it from, it was like my uncle that wired in $15 million. I was like, I don't freaking have an uncle that has $15 million, right? And it's like, and I said that, I was like, I told the woman that was on the program, I was like, it's important to tell stories that can be replicated, right? Because like, if a guy is out there banging, making more calls, or maybe he called the right person where I didn't make the call, that's the one thing I can replicate. But I can't, like, the familial affinity connection, like I just can't, right? Like it just it doesn't fit. Yeah, it doesn't benefit me in that space, right? So I think having a fine understanding of that, and once again, it's not discouraged. Like it doesn't mean that it's not possible. Do
you regret kind of going PWM right out of school instead of doing the banking?
No, I loved it. I mean, it was like I loved it to the extent. I mean, I loved the ability to, like my first client, one of my first big clients was a founder of a publicly traded company, right? Great guy, ex-McKinsey, super cerebral, like super smart. He was actually very patient with me. Because he knew everything, right? Yeah. And we cold call, got him in and whatnot. And he was a founder of a public trading company. He had like 4,000, 5,000 employees. And he would call the desk and he would say, "Is Pierre there?" Right? And mind you, I was partnered up with people that were like 20, 30 years my senior, and that was my guy. And I had his $20 million, right? He would call me for market advice. I report to him. I was like, I prided myself on being like white glove service, like high touch, right? And we just had a great relationship. And it was something cool about the fact, like, this is my guy. I'm still 20, mid-20s or, late 20s, whatever the case may be. It's like, this is my guy. And he's talking to me. I'm just a neighborhood kid from Long Beach, right? And it's like, but like, at the end of the day, I'm offering value. Now, mind you, we didn't have, and what was cool about him is that he was actually from another country, he was international. And it's like, he wasn't anchored into like on the U.S. wealth experience. Like he didn't grow up playing cruise. Just like,
there's no preconceived notions. Yeah.
Yeah. He just kind of, he made it. He worked really hard, created this business. And like, so maybe he appreciated a little bit of that grit within me, right? And that's why he gave me business. But the reason why I bring it up is that I'm able to interface with these people, whereas my classmates that graduated are still like, they're still not talking in meetings, legitimately, right? Like, so I'm talking to their CEOs and like literally trying to manage their assets. So it didn't happen as fast. I think if anything, I would have changed. I would have wished I was like related to more wealthy people, right? Or yeah, just like period, right? But
that's awesome. If I could change anything, I'd be related to more wealthy people. Yeah, that's a very good point for PWM. I could see how that'd be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. I get it. Like, nobody wants to, I don't want to anchor in on that part of life, but like, that's the reality of it. Right. And it's like, once again, you could be successful, like having, and the concept of having means is all relative, right? It's like, well, I wasn't extremely wealthy. I didn't have a butler, but maybe like if your dad was a CEO of XYZ company and his friends are CEOs of those companies, they're going to give you a look. They should, right? Like I live my life in this capacity right now for my kids to have those same kind of looks. Like that's everything I'm doing is for their benefit, right?
Yeah.
So that they can have those relationships and those experiences. So long story short, man, it was the ability to like, so I don't regret it because like the relationships that I established in terms of the clients that I covered, all the middle market bankers that I gave business to. So think about this, right? I was young 20s or mid 20s, young guy, but I was giving other people, adults, business. I was like, here's a business that Goldman can't cover, that we can't transact on. I'm going to give it to you. You can do the deal on it. So they loved me. Oh, I had tons of friends, you know, when I was 27, 28, they were like 50. They were my friends. We would go we would drink and go smoke cigar. Like they loved me because I was giving them business, right? And it was just like, and they were like, and I, you know, and they would try to introduce me to business as well. So I was able to bring those relationships to bear in my current role. But nonetheless, it was a great ride, man. I learned a lot. You know, helped them create what's like their sports entertainment group now that exists at Goldman. I did it literally like they're like bootstrapped. Like nobody could, like the firm met me. They met me along the way in many respects. They would give you business and they were supportive and they definitely were more patient with me, given that they knew I didn't have that background, right?
Yeah.
But they knew like I was out there making calls and sending emails and like creating relationships. So it can be done. It's just exhausting.
Because
really
how many calls do you think you were doing a week on average? 20, 30 calls at least?
Oh, more than that. Yeah, you were making like 30 in a day. Yeah,
oh my gosh.
You do like I ended up pivoting like I ended up doing more emails. Yeah, no, I still, and so just being like I don't want to like pride myself on the wrong thing. It's like the last four years, like you've established such a book of business that now you're getting inflows, right? So you may not have the wealthy family, but now you have a client that's introducing you to more clients, right?
Right.
So like that helps. So it starts building on its own. Like you shouldn't be cold. Like you don't have to. That's the thing. Like you shouldn't be cold calling like past 5 years. But it's something to be said for the people that were doing it still, right? Because like they still wanted to like identify new business that's out there.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing.
So
that's what they say with PWM or like any sort of asset management role, right? Eventually it becomes very lucrative because it's just you're building those bricks, right? It takes a long time to get one, but as you build you usually keep the clients for a long time, right?
You do. And they stick with you. It's very sticky. It's not like it's not one-off transactions. Like clients with you for years, you get integrated in their lives and they get integrated in your lives.
So tell me why leave? Kind of like, was it just like the grind was just too much?
Yeah, I was burnt out, man. I wasn't, and when I was there, I wasn't my full self there as well. It was hard to bring my full self to work, given that my full self to work at work. I think corporations are a little bit more open, given like everything that's going on in the world, right? In terms of like being more embracing. But at that time, at the end of the day, people were like, how are you spending your, like, this is a very New York question, especially when you have kids. Like, what are you and the kids doing for the summer? Like, how are you spending your summer? And it's like, so it's
that's so New York. That's so New York.
You're going out east, you're going out to your vacation home, which is cool. Like, that's the life that I want my kids. Like, what if you don't have the means to do that, right? And it's like, it's just a very different world. So like,
you're like, we're hanging out in our apartment.
Literally.
Yeah.
What do you mean? You're gonna be in the city hanging out?
Even as an analyst, there was that pressure, man. When I was an analyst in IB, I was like, well, they're like, you're gonna go to the Hampton. I'm like, what? Like, no, I can't afford like my mom and dad cut me off after college, So it's like,
dude, I'm paying enough to live in the city, which is another issue. Like I'm not living I'm living in the city right across the street from the office. Like, yeah, no, I'm gonna enjoy the city. Like, it's just like we're not going out east. Like, we're not doing that. So like,
yeah, fair.
It became exhausting to like kind of like to have that shock and awe factor and like kind of manage the egos of the people that I'm chatting with, because it was like that just wasn't a world that they were like. They're literally like, you're not going out east, or like you live down here in Battery Park. Your kids are going to school down here. I'm like, yeah, it's like there's nothing but bankers, attorneys, and nannies down here. Like, of course, like it's a great area to be in. It's like you're not going to private. Like, no, like I pay so much rent. I'm gonna keep them down here. But long story short, man, like I think I was just burnt out, wanted to come back to LA. And the firm kind of just parted ways. So I ended up working for a small regional bank up in California. And, they brought me over and said like, hey, we want you to bring that New York pedigree out here. I really want you to grow our business, right? In terms of extending capital, extending balance sheet to financial services professionals and small businesses out here. And, didn't know much about the firm, knew I wanted to be back in LA. Both sides of my kids, the grandparents are in LA as well. So like, there's like that part, like being in New York, like we love our old nanny. She's still family to this day, but like there's not that support system, right? So it was just, like I said, it became very overwhelming. So it was a life business decision, but ended up doing that for a while at bank. And, they weren't extending capital to the extent that I had hoped for. And so which makes it hard because you're doing biz dev. Like the only way you really eat
You're
is
doing
if
biz
you're
dev,
extending capital.
you're doing biz dev, and then they're saying no.
There's no product. There's no product really, right? So it was challenging. I thought as a smaller bank that they would be a bit more flexible, right? Because I'm coming from like the Goldman handcuffs, like everything like is so like
too small,
compliance.
do this.
Yeah. So like, and it's like the Goldman just doesn't want to touch. Whereas I thought like at Bank of California, like we can do tons of deals, and we couldn't really get deals done. So that ended quickly. Then I ended up doing like some product work for a bunch of people, a bunch of private equity firms, helping them raise capital. Then doing business like identifying acquisition targets for them, fund structuring, and helping them identify acquisition targets. And then I ultimately came across the role that I'm in now, Power Digital. And it's like this crazy agency that's been around for 8 years, based in San Diego. So like I'm back in San Diego. Not at San Diego State, but I'm back in San Diego. Tons of San Diego State alums. And full service digital marketing, 210 people. We are private equity backed ourselves, right? But what's unique about it is we do like paid search, PR, anything you can think of within the realm of social media, right? Or digital marketing, I should say. But what's unique is that we have this machine AI, this diligence tech called Nova. And what it does is it literally latches on to a company's analytics, so like Google Analytics, Google Ads, Shopify, Amazon.
Everything on their digital thing, it brings it together.
It brings it together. It analyzes all machine AI. It's been around for 7 years. And what it does, it will assign a score to that company. Saying like, hey, you scored 180 out of 220. We can show you how to get to 200 out of 220, right? Yeah. That's great. It's digital marketing optimization. That's cool. The big kicker for like a bunch of my friends who play this game called Spades, like the big joker, which is like relevant Spades, like is that it allows you to forecast revenue growth with 90% accuracy over that same time period. So the group that I run, I head up our private equity venture capital division. So all we do is that we insert our diligence tech, it's called Nova, within the journey of a PE or VC's diligence process. So they're looking at operations, balance sheet, logistics, maybe some headcount stuff. We're purely coming in and looking at digital marketing and say, hey, you're thinking about buying this company, either you're pre-LOI or in LOI, you're thinking about buying this company. This is what the investment will be required from a digital marketing perspective for it to grow. But more importantly, this is the revenue uptick that you're going to get. So we're able to calculate that ROAS number with 90% accuracy. So it's beneficial to that extent. Then on the other end, it's like, these are companies that are already within your portfolio.
But does this only work for digital companies, or does this work where, a lot of the deals come through?
Exactly. So B2B is top of funnel, right? So B2B is like, how do we get eyeballs, ears, and feet like to the business? And then like we can get to the bottom. It's all about conversion. We track it down. So we do B2B, e-commerce, D2C. Yeah, everything, right? The science is impeccable. So like the job itself is a mixture of. So my day to day, what I was getting at is that all I do is talk to growth investors, VCP, like the biggest firms on the street, right? And I help them incorporate our diligence tech as a part of their process. And now the conversation is different in the sense like it's not like, hey, give me money to manage or give me an opportunity to manage or the firm to manage. It's like I can show you how to make money. I can literally show you how to go from $10 million on your portco in revenue to $20 million in a 6-month window.
Yeah.
Backed by science, 90% accurate. Like literally, we can show you that, right? So the conversations are a bit more readily received. I guess because like I'm now coming to guys and helping them make money, and it's cool, man, because it's a mixture of finance for those in New York, finance, tech, and digital marketing, right? And like I always wanted to get in tech. All my friends are like working at the Googles of the world. Their t-shirt culture, right? And I get free lunch, it's t-shirt, it's fun, right? You get paid well to work there. But then it allowed me to still be within finance and like to really like to leverage those relationships that I've already created when I was a banker at Goldman. So it's a great seat, man. We're adding a lot of value. We're helping a lot of small portfolio companies like seed stage, not really more like Series A stage companies grow on the VC side. We're helping investors be smarter in terms of the investment decisions that they make, in terms of the companies that they buy, right? And it's just been a great seat. It's been a great seat. That's young awesome. Firm. As I mentioned, we're private equity backed. We think that there's some tremendous opportunity for us to transact in the future in terms of us, like we're a perfect fit, like a tech-enabled consulting firm. So maybe coming back full circle to like the consulting world, right?
How did you think about jumping to like taking that firm? Was it a point where like you had left the Bank of California and you're like, hey, I just need to get something?
Yeah, well, I was working in private equity. I was doing deals. I was doing deals.
Yeah.
I was doing deals I was good. Yeah, I was doing deals. I mean, I was in W-2, right? But I was producing income. I was good. But no, like I saw the role and it was a new group. So the firm has been around for 8 years. The technology has been around for 7 years. the division wasn't established. They were like working with some PE and VC firms like loosely, but our private equity sponsor was like, hey, this is like phenomenal tech, $1 billion idea. Like you should roll it out to the street. So they were explicitly hiring for somebody to drive to create this business, P&L responsibility and so forth. And I was like, this is perfect, right? And so like I was debating between that and like
does sound perfect for you. So what's it? It sounds like I'm tailor made for you because you had a lot of those relationships too.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely bringing all of them to bear, and like it's a customer base that I know, right? So, but I was thinking about doing that and like going back to like private wealth management, and like I was kind of over that, right? And it's just like it was like they got 10 years. I did 10 years of service, respectfully to the servicemen and women in this country. But like I did 10 years, on the street in New York City proper, and I got tired of like trying to create relationships that I'm a little bit older at that time. I worked fully myself at a firm, and like to really just like to enjoy where I was working. Like I had tons of great experiences when I was in New York, but at the same time, it just wasn't, I probably have more grades now because of that.
Not as many as me. Not as many as me.
I gotta cut my beard down. Well, yeah, I gotta cut it down. But quarantine is definitely giving me more grades. But no, it's just like it's a perfect seat. The people that I work with, we're a firm of 230. I'm probably the top 10 in terms of the older guys there, right? But the president I report is like 2 years older than me. The CEO was like 5 years younger than me. Great culture. It's cool, man. It's all fun. It's like brilliant people that were as brilliant as my colleagues at Goldman, but they're just like brilliant about like digital marketing, right? So it's a new language. And what I'm doing is this is the cool part too, actually. What I'm doing is like I'm literally bridging the gap between finance and digital marketing, because what happens for the finance folks is that we think of marketing as an expense, right? Period, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas in reality, and I'm like fully drinking the Kool-Aid, like I'm like baptized in the sauce, like it really is a revenue driver. Mm-hmm. It really is a revenue driver. So like now, like so my sales cycle, my like biz dev process is a little bit slower because like the PE VC folks don't get it necessarily immediately because they've been doing deals and they'll continue to do deals without this tech that we have, right? Yeah. But now it's like me kind of like telling like let me show you what it does, right? And let me show you how we can accurately forecast revenue. Let me show you when we did it, like the growth potential that you have, like your portcos. And for those that get it, we all on board, they love it. So it's been a great ride. It's one of the first, like, if you think about my career, like we kind of went through the full spectrum of it. It literally is the best place I can ever be. Like just in terms of like the people that I work with, the software, the tech.
Can you talk to me about like lifestyle, the difference between lifestyle? Obviously it sounds like you're a lot more motivated, rejuvenated. You feel good, but tell me about like lifestyle wise.
Lifestyle is it's hard too because like we're talking about within a COVID environment. It's like it's just really, really weird, right? In terms of, like I think everybody is working harder now, remotely than you would be if you were in the office because like work never stops. Right? It's like
I've been talking to associates in banking. They're just getting completely murdered.
It's like they're not going out to dinner. They're not going out. You're not going out. You're not doing a client dinner, right? Like you're on your couch, right? Maybe you move your dinner table to your couch and like so you're around, right? Like there's not much you can do. So you're working hard. I would say that in all fairness, though, from what I gathered pre-COVID, is that the digital marketing folks work as hard. They're not working like hard like banking analysts. But they're definitely up until like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Like you're just like, they're seeing things through. Because what ends up happening too in this world, like we're doing so many calls and like that at some point, like you don't get to do your work until like the evening, right? And I cover the firm nationally, right? So what's challenging on my scene in particular is that I cover like most of the private equity firms are out east, right? And all the VC firms are out west. Yeah, right. And so like literally doing calls at 6 and then for my East Coast guys, and like I'm doing calls here at 6 p.m. for my West Coast people, right? And then you have to actually do the work. And then like life is about follow up, right? So then like when you follow up and triangulate, like you're doing that in the evenings, right? And then you're having calls with people that are aspiring to go to business school, want to work in banking, and they want to kind of tap in and check with you. So I've been doing a lot of that this week, but like there's not a lot of time. But the difference is the job is fun. We work with a bunch of cool like the port codes that I'm covering are like really cool, a bunch of cool tech, a bunch of cool like e-commerce brands. Like there's like the exciting element to that. I don't have to worry about putting on a suit and a tie every day, or making it to me like that.
I've been away from that for a long time.
like that element, or making sure it's like the right tie, right? No, that element is out. Like you just come up, you show up, and you go to work, bro. And like that part, like, and the economics are like great. I'm still there, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but like, yeah, it's just like I will be doing just as well as I was doing when I was in New York, right? Just in terms of like that's if we continue to do all the things that we're tracking, we're forecasted to do, and the conversations are just more rewarding. So like, I'll tell you this.
So it's a little bit of a pay cut on the cash front, but in terms of options and other stuff, it's potentially.
What was hard about, and this is like what was hard about banking, especially in the seat that I was in. So in investment management, private wealth at Goldman, you're not based in bonus. So you're full commission. That's another part. They give you a business card and they say like, hey, you're based in bonus when you first start, but then you flip this trigger and it's called self-sustaining, meaning that you bring on enough business to outpace your base and bonus, and now you're fully getting paid on the money that you manage, right?
So did you ever dip down below that base and bonus like Goldman in a bad year?
No. Like so once I was self-sustaining, I was always self-sustaining.
So you were getting paid probably pretty well by the end. You had that big base client.
Yeah. But so the thing is, what I was getting at, I was doing well. I was doing that. Not only was I doing well,
do you mind sharing around? Was it like 200K, 300?
I was doing more than that. Yeah, I was
more
doing
than that.
I was the way it was. I was legitimately, humbly speaking. I was doing more. I could have been the 12th man or 11th man on the roster for the Knicks. It's like that kind of but like a lot of it, so like it kind of get like, it's not like when you think about the 12 and 11 man, you can't take like LeBron's and like AD's contract. Think about like the 11 and 12 man, it's very different. And this is back in those times, right? So it's like the pay scale is very different now for sports as well, even for 11 and 12 man. But nonetheless, doing extremely well. But like the hard part was that you were paid in stock too, though. Right, so it's like you're making this number, you're making $1, right? But it's like no, it's really like 70 cents. And you can see the 30 cents that are there, but it's like, nah, it's like 70. Like, so like that 30, like that, like, so the student loans that I have aren't taking this like 30 cents in stock.
Was it a 4-year vest to get the?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's horrible.
Exactly. Yeah. So exactly. Right. So so like you're waiting. It's like, I can't pay my student loans. I can't buy a house with that.
That's good. You stayed there for a while. At least a lot of those vested. The initial.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So then the other part is like, then you're living in New York. You're like I literally lived across the street from the office. So you can kind of work the math. Like literally. So like Goldman was 200. I'm at the 90 West. Goldman was 200 West. I'm at the 90. You kind of work the math and like, so it's expensive being in the seat, right? And kind of like maintaining the lifestyle to be there. And it's like nothing extravagant. It's just like, these are just costs, right? So like, you're doing well, but like, you don't really feel like
you're not banking.
Like if I'd have done anything differently, I would have worked in like the Dallas office or the Miami office, because like there's no state income tax. It's a little bit cheap. You know what I mean?
There's a big trend for that now. I don't know if you've seen it around all the news. Yeah.
All the firms are thinking about making the trip to Miami, but like then it's like, if you make that, if you were to move there, like would I have been able to build my business the same way? Like at the end of the day, there have been people that have been doing my job that look like me in New York City since the early 1900s. So like there's like not that shock factor. There was still a lot of it in New York, but like it was a little bit easier, right? Because like people just get finance in New York, whereas in LA there's like a lot of education that takes place just in terms of the industry of finance. So I was doing well when I was in New York. Excuse me, I'm doing well now. The pay structure is very different, based on bonus, but I run a P&L. We'll be hiring soon enough in terms of like growing out the business. But it's more. I think what's interesting, especially given the demographic that we're talking to, is that for me, like I think everybody wants, as rightfully so, they want to maximize their growth, their earnings potential, right? And I get it. Like I had to grow up with nothing, and I hate when people like say that, like they kind of grew up with a lot. Like literally, I grew up with like I didn't even have much, right? Mm-hmm. And so like I wanted to like maximize it, and they're different. Like maximizing is relative too, right? But I want to make as much money as possible. Then when you do it, and that's when you realize, and people tell you this, like money isn't everything. I used to get pissed off when people used to say that, but they were wealthy. They're like, "Oh, money isn't everything." I'm like, dude, you're wealthy. Like, let me experience it first, and then I'll tell you that money isn't everything. So people that are listening, money isn't everything. But I understand that you got to experience it for yourself. So now I'm at the point in my career, my life, where it's like there are other things that bring me happiness outside of getting paid, right? And so like what you'll see is like there are tons of people that are still in banking to this day, and they hate it. They hate it. Like they just like this is like they're miserable every day, right? Because like the money is there, but maybe you can't spend it the same way, maybe because like it doesn't hit the same, right?
Yeah, or your relationships with your family or friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I see my kids, I'm able to pick them up from school. Like my kids are gonna get to the age where they're gonna start playing. Like, once the world normalizes, they'll start playing ball, like any kind of ball or any kind of sport. I can be a coach. You know what I mean? Like I can just like I can be there. So like there's like a rewarding element to that in my life right now like supersedes the dollar, right? So so now I'm doing that, and I still get paid a well enough dollar, right? But, like, I have that flexibility, and I'm working with this like really cool normal people, right? Like, of every aspect of life. Whereas I was in this like small kind of silo world where it was like it just wasn't real.
I get it.
It wasn't.
Well, I mean, it's a long run, man. People usually don't last for 10 years. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, I get reminded. My friends remind me every once in a while, like, yo, like, you were there, on the street for 10 years. It's like, and it's like, yeah, I guess I was, right? And it's like, never knew anything about it, nothing about it at all. Like, I've got a bank account at like Chase back in the day when I was a kid. Like, that's it, right? That's like and then it was funny. I forgot what year Pursuit of Happiness came out with Will Smith. But, like, I was like, that's like my freaking life, right? It's like just like cold calling. Like, he's like, I forgot where he worked in the Bay, but it's like the Chris Gardner story actually. He's like cold calling, and like he came from nothing. But like it was just a grind. I made tons of great relationships out there. I think everybody deserves an opportunity. Well, before COVID, I don't know what New York is like now, but I think everybody deserves an opportunity to live in New York for a little bit and like to feel it and then get the energy of the city. I think that's a place where like the brightest, people, and this is like me romanticizing it, I get it. But like the brightest, like let me finish. The brightest in any given area, go there, they move there. That's like the all-star.
I was gonna ask you, so like we've kind of come to where you're at now. Is there anything, just looking back, not what you'd regret or anything you changed, but like any kind of final words of wisdom before we wrap up, like in terms of?
Yeah, I think words of wisdom. I think everybody deserves the opportunity to live in New York, especially within finance. I think
I loved it. I was there for 6 years. Yeah,
to see it, to smell it. I think it's like outside of finance, like New York is very diverse. Every like walk of life is there. Every religion is there. Every language is there. And you just like, the thing is like New York versus LA is like, LA is bubble culture, meaning that everybody's in their car, they kind of live in their respective areas, and you may go from one area to the other, but you're in your car. In New York, you're on the train. You're literally, I had a client, I had a millionaire client who was like worth like 600 million. He would take the train all the time. I knew a billionaire guys would take the train, right? You're there, you got the banker, you got the attorney, you got the dancer, you got the person newly immigrated, you got the homeless person. Like, he's like, it's like everybody's on you just, even if you're not talking, you see each other, right? And like you just kind of see. So I think there's something like exciting about that, and it just makes you sharper. I remember when I was in New York, people are working all these crazy hours of the day, but I still find time. Like I work out a lot, and not as much as I should be right now. So COVID, but like quarantine, like people like they're working 60 hours a week, but they go like they're training for the marathon, right? And they're volunteering 15 hours a week, whatever number, I don't know, at some like nonprofit, right? Or maybe they have their own business. Like it's like it's like literally the all stars, the best and the brightest are out there. So if you could spend some time there, I think that's one kind of like last nugget I'll leave. And the others just in terms of thinking about like. I think the follow-up piece, like the triangulation that I chatted about, I think that's critical. I think the safe conversations is critical. What I would also say, this is very helpful for the people that are in the audience, and we can end on this note, is that what they have to remind themselves is that when they're pursuing when they're looking at a job or looking at a firm, and they're trying to get face time with these executives that are there are thousands, hundreds of other people just like them, those students, that are reaching out. Right? It sounds crazy, like that are just like you, right? It's like if you find somebody that doesn't have time, it's because literally they're trying to do their job, manage their household, and allocate time to students. And like they just don't have time. So what they can do in order to be successful in terms of navigating the recruiting process, and I didn't mention this, is that I was very intentional and thoughtful about all the conversations that I had. So as opposed to like, hey, can we spend an hour to 30 minutes? It's crazy sometimes I hear this, chatting. It's like, hey, can we spend 15 to 20 minutes talking about these 4 things? Very like relevant points, very like custom to like the targeted to like to the region that they're in, and it's building on prior conversation. Can we talk about these 4 things in 15 minutes? Right? You get them on, you talk about it, you kind of connect the dots of who else like the other conversations. Like you demonstrate the work that you've done. Like I've taken the time to chat with this person, and he told me that this is what's unique about the Boston office, and like the demographic versus the Dallas versus the LA office. It's like, okay, this person kind of gets it, right? And so then once you get to your questions, it's like, all right, 15 minutes is up. If they like you, they're gonna be like, no, let's continue to talk, right? But then it's like,
let me help you because you actually aren't just clueless, just asking.
Yeah, like, and let me give you more time. Yeah, let me give you more time, right? And then and if they're busy, and then they'll say, you know what, I'm busy now, but like maybe we can follow up some other time. But like at the end of the day, you're being thoughtful. You have your note, and like, and then you follow up, and then like after that, you have the meeting. You say thanks for the time. You don't request another, like, thanks for the time. I'll keep posting along my journey, right? And you keep them posted, right? And then they'll want to check in with you, like, hey, how's it going? Or you'll send them that note, like, hey, I met with these other people. they're like, oh, we should probably catch up again. And like, you'll find them because you're being respectful of the time, but you have to be mindful of the fact like all your classmates. So my responsibility was I had like the LA pipeline, I had the UVA pipeline, I had the Reardon Fellows pipeline, I had my fraternity brothers pipeline, I had diverse hires, minority hires, right? I had that pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. And like everybody was, and then I just had like everybody, like looking me up on LinkedIn, it's like hey, everybody's like they're all calling me, can I get 30 minutes? And like, no, dude, I don't even have 30 minutes for myself right now, right? But if you say, hey, this is what I've done, I want to talk to you about, for 15 minutes about these given topics. It's like great. So like that's that part. And the other part, what I used to start doing when I was at Goldman, everybody would hit me up for time, is that I would actually encourage group calls. Because at the end of the day, it's like it's you and your classmates, you guys are all asking about the same things, right? Like, how'd you get there? What is the life like? So like, let's all find 30 minutes where we can collectively talk. Still send me your questions in advance, right? Yeah. And I'll give you the information you need. And so like, you don't have to sell me. Like you'll get the information you need, and it just helps me out, and it allows me to make those to make time for those conversations. So just be mindful of your audience. Understand like they have job responsibilities. They're not giving you the highs because they want to talk. Like just like there are hundreds of other people like you that are reaching out, that are trying to ask. Like if everybody, 100 people ask for 30 minutes, you can kind of do the math, right? It's like it's just not going to work. So just be mindful of your audience.
The good part about this is your advice will now hit several thousand people in one shot.
Exactly. So I tell people, I tell my guys, like, you should just record it, man. Just like record it literally. Or like I point to like a document.
Now you can point to this pod. You just listen to this.
Yeah, legitimately, it's like there's tremendous. I do this like Reardon has been good. Like I talk to their students, like they've been really good. Like where we can point to a dot, like let me point to this, and like because people, you got to be, and this is like from a biz dev perspective, I'm always mindful of my audience, right? Yeah. And like right now, this week, it's been really weird because like things are slow. Some people I thought some people aren't, but it's like I think it's like pretty like audacious on my end to reach out to somebody that's like, hey, give me a new business right now. It's like
New Year's Eve,
it's like the week before the holidays. It's like,
for the record, this is December 31st, 2020 for everyone listening. Yeah. This is when we're recording this. So.
It's to be fair to Pat, he's been nice. He's been like trying to get in front of me for a couple months. I've just been like pushing it back because I've been busy, but like this is the best week for me because things are slow, right? In terms of like all my clients and like the VCP guys or girls, like they're not on the desk necessarily. So it doesn't make sense for me to go out and like to reach out for new business right now because one, you don't want to miss, you only get one shot, quote unquote. You don't want to miss the shot, right? So you want to make sure it's impactful. So like, I'll just wait to the tail end. But like, I'm mindful of like the people that I'm talking to, like, will they receive this outreach well right now? And that also goes back, and I should have clarified, is like, you were asking about all the calls I was making. I was like, I made a quick pivot to doing emails because in emails, in New York City, everybody's head down, looking at their phone, texting. You don't get a signal sometimes, like texting or like getting an email, right? And you can kind of control an email. Imagine this: there are people that have been calling me right now during this podcast, and it's very disruptive, right? I am talking to Pat, like we should have been chatting months ago. Like I can't take the call, right? And in the same way, where like I was calling on people trying to get their capital, it's like I'm trying to get their capital. Everybody else is trying to get their capital. There's not too much unique about what we were doing at Goldman. I mean, it's a great brand, but like reality is like strategy solutions are pretty much similar across the street, right? Yeah. So like you just got to be mindful of the audience, man. So it made more sense for me to send somebody an email knowing that they can respond to it when they want to. Sometimes they'll respond late at night because they've done their work for the day, and I'll get into their emails at 11 p.m. And then when they responded, I would still be up and I would respond back too as well. And then the other piece is that I would end up making the calls, but now I can reference the email that I made. Hey, Patrick, it's Pierre Laveau calling from X, Y, and Z, following up on the email that I sent, right? But like, so I'm a big fan of just like, just being mindful of your audience, man. Like giving yourself a bit of grace, giving them a bit of grace as well. And just being like, it's so easy to be kind of consumed on the me. Like, why isn't somebody responding? Why aren't they being helpful? And you got to understand, like, people are just like dealing with a lot and like they're working on other stuff. So
I tell people, you get a hit rate of 5%. You're doing well for cold.
Yeah, but you got to make it. But you want to make it easy for them, right? Like even when I was talking to one of my colleagues 2 hours ago, she sent a recap email to one of our clients. I'm like, you want to make it so that they don't have to think about how to respond. Like, give them an action, either yes or no, or actually, this is what I do. It's like, tell them what we're going to do and allow them to say that we're not going to do it if it doesn't fit, right? Like, this is what we think the budget is going to be. It's like, as if they don't want that to be the budget, then they'll come and they'll tell you. Otherwise, you say like, hey, can you give me a budget?
Yeah.
If you ask them to give you a budget, like they're not going to really focus on the email. They're going to focus on their day-to-day job. So, man, it was hopefully, what I've shared today could be impactful to somebody. Be mindful of Can I leave one quick
Yes,
20-second
please.
story? Do you mind?
Go ahead. Yeah, go.
There's this concept, huge nugget. It's this concept of running your own race, right? And it's like kind of like, you know, you're only competing with yourself. Running your own race means, and I learned this when I was literally in New York City. I used to run up and down the West Side Highway, in the bike paths or whatever. Is so in private wealth, it's like, yeah, like it's easy to get distracted about other people bringing in business, but you don't know if that story can be replicated, right? So like you got to stick with your plan, how many calls you're going to make, you know, your approach and your business plan, like execute them, and you got to run your own race. And the reason why, and it really does have a racing function, because I remember being on the West Side Highway. I was a New York City marathon runner, you know, sub 4 hours. Like I was like, you know, I was a runner, right? As big as I am too, right? So like, but nonetheless, like I remember running on the West Side Highway, and like you'll be running, and like somebody will literally pass you up and make a quick right. You're like, well, she's like, how are they like why am I like, how am I running this? Like how they pass me up, right? But like what you don't realize is that person could have just been starting out with fresh legs, right? And it's like they're just running, and they'll kind of like, you know, slow down the end, or they can be finishing their run. They want to finish it with the sprint. So when they turn the corner, you don't know where they're starting at, and you don't know where they're ending, right? So what's more important for you is to maintain your pace. You said you're going to start out with this pace, like, so run your own race, and like don't get caught up with what everybody else is doing, because you don't know the circumstances in which those kind of quote unquote success have occurred, right? You don't know if it can necessarily be replicated. So make sure you have a very thorough plan, and you just execute on your plan, and you be mindful of competing with yourself. So hopefully that was a good one to end on. I appreciate the time, man. It's definitely was a good chat.
I love that. I love ending on that because I think it's so true. It relates to a lot of things, not just the work plan, which is life in general, and not looking always to your side and being content with what you have and grateful for what you have.
It's crazy, especially in the social media world, man. It's like there's so much data out there. Like, it's easy to kind of get caught up. Like you literally got to be like disciplined and like run your own race, and it would definitely work itself out.
There's a lot of people showing the best part of their lives. They're not showing the parts that are stress, the sleepless nights, the kids screaming. My kids, you know, screaming. Like, yeah, this is not easy. I got grades. I can't even shave. I don't have time to shave. I'm like hopping on there. Like, you know, people are like, oh, you know. People like to glamorize stuff, but it's, you know.
I romanticize a lot of stuff, but I also have a good habit of.
You made me miss New York. You made me miss.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I'm very candid about like the realities of the job, the places that I worked. You know, it's just like, yeah, like people do business with people that they're familiar with, that they like, and you know, and you can find yourself being not. So I was very very knowledgeable about tons of stuff. I have not experienced it, but I am very knowledgeable of it, right? And because I'm just an intellectually curious kind of guy, and I knew that, you know, selfish enough that it would benefit for me to kind of know about these things. But man, no, great chat today. Sorry that it took a little bit longer than anticipated, but you know, definitely was. I received a lot of benefit from it. Yeah, I received a lot of benefit from it. So for those that are out there that are thinking about they're professionals like myself that have a little bit more experience or a little bit of experience, are thinking about doing a podcast, it's a great experience. I would recommend it. Kind of therapeutic in ways. It makes me feel bad because I am getting old. Like, I've been working at these places. I start throwing years out. Like, I graduated in 2002, like high school in 99. Like, oh man, like you're up there. But nonetheless, no, thank you for the time. And if there's anything else I can do to be helpful, thank you. And thank you for everything you've done for like my network as well.
No, thank you. And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.